welcome to Hospice Peterborough's podcast called Conversations About Dying. I'm here with our supportive care counseling team.
Red Keating.
Dave Kennedy.
And I'm Julie Brown. This is a special episode today because we're joined by a guest that we're very happy to have with us, Dr. John Beamish, one of our palliative physicians here at Hospice Peterborough. Welcome, John.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
We have titled this podcast, Palliative Medicine, The Last Responders. Just recognizing that, our palliative physicians, our nurses, and our PSWs are really the last responders working with people. We often talk about first responders, and especially in this past year during the pandemic. But here's the other side of that as well. So to start today, John, I thought we'd just ask you about if you could just tell us a little bit about your journey in medicine, but particularly palliative medicine, and how you came to be working in this area for such a long time.
Yes.
It's been how long?
Well, I think Tyrannosaurus still roamed in. I've always had an interest in palliative care right from the time I went to medical school. My background in going into medicine and pre-medicine was not the traditional science background. I was a psychology major. So I was always interested in people, and I was always interested in the interplay between medical science and the individual. And palliative care was a developing field that allowed me to sort of explore that area and develop. And it was in its infancy when I was first starting, and I was able to grow with it. And it's been a very enriching part of my career.
How has it changed over the years?
It was, in the early years, it was very informal. We now have good scientific background. We have good academic basis on which we act. We now have teams. It was really more a philosophy than an organized approach. Now we have an organized approach.
How is it, use the word, how is it get perceived by your colleagues and peers? Like, where does palliative medicine find a welcoming spot within the medical world?
And that's been a real change. I mean, when I first started in palliative medicine, there was a sense that if you were doing palliative medicine, you were giving up on your patients. And that has definitely changed. And now we are seen as the last responders. So that if you're a caregiver in another field, you have an obligation to make sure for your patients who are dying that they get good care at the end of their life. And our colleagues in cardiology and oncology and renal medicine look to us to help with that last phase of life.
What do you find meaningful in this work personally?
Well, there's 2 points in medicine where you break down the usual barriers between patient and physician. One of those is birth, when you're allowed to be part of this very privileged life experience, and there's a certain humility that comes from being part of that. The other is death, in that you're allowed to be part of this very special, unique life experience. And it's a real privilege to be part of that.
So how do you use yourself in the medicine? Like, how, what's the role of you as a person inside palliative medicine?
I think one of the biggest roles is to be an interpreter and an explainer. When you're dying, the experience for you and your family is overwhelming. Many well-meaning people are telling you completely contradictory things. There's a sense of being lost in the forest. And I think one of the things palliative physicians do is say, here's the pathway we're on. Here's the path through the forest, and help people understand what's happening to them. I find people cope incredibly well if they understand what's happening. Where they lose the grip is when they don't understand what's going on, or they feel that people are not being completely honest with them. So being an interpreter is a big, big part. And of course, we bring all the symptom management tools. But if you boil it down, we're an interpreter. We're an explainer.
So does it kind of feel sometimes like we're the ones that are going to give you the straight goods? Like we're going
Very much.
Yeah.
Very much.
I'm gonna bring some clarity and some
It's a hard thing, isn't it? Because people have this sense of what you said earlier, John, about people feel you're giving up on your patient. So this role of hope, and this is one of the pieces that for me and working in this is that we all need some sense of hope. But when people have been told they have a life-threatening illness, they immediately lose any ability to have hope, other than I hope I can find the miracle cure.
Yeah.
And so everything gets focused on getting better when that's just not possible 99.9% of the time.
But hope has to be based in reality.
Exactly.
It can't be fantasy. I mean, hope that is fantasy does not serve us well.
Yeah.
It puts you on a plane going to Mexico to take some type of, bizarre cure that's not going to work and will just drain your bank account. So hope has to be based in reality, and most people know that. Mm-hmm. And they want to know, what's the reality? Where am I in this forest? And hope takes many forms. It's not just a hope of cure. It's not just a hope of life extending. It's a hope that maybe I'll see my grandchildren one more time. Maybe I'll get to the cottage one more time. So you help people redefine what hope looks like. And I find people who are dying, they're not hopeless. They have hope. They have a sense of life. They have a sense of being still part of life and still looking forward to things. It's not as though they're in the slough of despond where they've given up. You see that very, very rarely. And in fact, if you see someone who looks like they've given up, you're very worried that they may well be depressed, that there's something else going on. Because that's not a normal human reaction to dying.
So what are the typical questions someone would ask you if here's my first time I'm getting my palliative diagnosis, I'm meeting you, what do people want to know generally? What are their main questions?
Well, I always want to know, what do they understand? Because who knows what they've been told or what they've heard when they've been told. We transmit a ton of information at people in a doctor's appointment, and very little sticks. So, part of, I usually start by trying to find out what their understanding is, and we go from there with what my understanding is, and I try to make sure we're all on the same place on the track, that everyone understands the same details. There's a
theme or a feeling I get that you're working together, so doing things as a team on the same plane versus having something done to you, which I think maybe medicine sometimes makes us feel like we're having something done to us.
That's right.
We're the patient, right?
Red, that's a really good point. I mean, traditional medical care, you go to your physician, you want to get better, you do what they tell you. Once you reach a point where medicine can no longer cure you, that dynamic changes. And it's really not about living longer, but living better. And you're the one who defines that. So part of my task is to find out, if I can't cure you, what is it that's important to do in the time you've got left? And what are the things that will make you most comfortable? So you're right, that power dynamic shifts, and the patient is very much a partner, if not a leader, telling the care team what it is they want to see their future look like.
One of the things, John, I've noticed when we do rounds here on Wednesday mornings here in the residence for our clients who are in our residence, and when you've been here, you often, when you're speaking about one of our clients who has the palliative diagnosis, you're often speaking just as much about their family members as you are about and you have a phenomenal memory, but you know, like that's a really big part of the work too, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things and one of the core tenets of palliative care is that you're not treating just the individual, you're treating their family as they define it. And
as they define it.
Really critical.
Yeah.
So it's important for the care team to know who's important to this person. What are the relationships that enrich this life and that we have to help tend? Who's going to be feeling the impact of this death the most, so that we can help those folks? And oftentimes, as you guys know, it's not who you think.
Right.
Not always who you think.
So true.
And that's true too. And I'm sure, I know you've had incredible experience in terms of a lot of the family dynamics are toxic coming into this.
Yeah.
And that makes it really difficult, doesn't it?
Well, it does. And, you know, I tell myself very often that people die the way they lived.
Yes.
And if they come to us in chaos, we're not going to turn it around in their last days of life and have, you know, the family sitting around the bed singing Kumbaya. It's not going to happen. So we have to meet people where they are, and sometimes we're meeting them in chaos. And as caregivers, we don't like that. It makes us extremely uncomfortable. We don't like chaos. But sometimes that's where we have to meet people, and we have to meet their families. It rubs against our innate desire to fix.
Isn't that true?
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, we all are fixers, and we wouldn't be in this
That's
world. And sometimes it just rubs against that.
Yeah, and people, and you're right. That's chaos becomes their norm, and it's so it really makes it difficult for a care team outside to really engage that in a way that doesn't, you know, put pressure on us to try to make it all better.
Yeah. And don't you think sometimes it takes rounds where as a team we can discuss that that's the reality, and as a group that responsibility is set aside a little bit.
That's right.
We say this is where we're at. We're not going to fix it. How are we going to sort of manage it? How are we going to help the people we need to help?
And we may be subject to it for a short period of time.
we may be subject.
In one way or another, we may feel a little bit of what it would be like to be in that family for
That's
a short
right.
period of time.
We get caught in the hurricane.
Yeah.
And I think too that sometimes there is this romantic idea of death when death is coming, that maybe we will solve things, or maybe we can fix the hurts or heal the wounds or tie up loose ends. And sometimes that's just not a reality.
Yeah. And it's not to say that's not an opportunity.
Absolutely.
And sometimes wonderful healing things can happen at the end of life.
And I'm sure you facilitated many of those.
And we all have. And we see that. But it's not a given.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a guarantee. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's okay.
And I think what I've noticed too is that if the person who's dying is the hub, that kind of, you know, they're the ones that are phoning all the family members to come for the family dinners, and they're the ones that make it all happen. If they're the ones dying, chances are nobody's going to replace that person.
No.
Many times that family just fragments.
They do, and their level of distress is higher. Because they're losing that person that linked everything together, and they don't know how to replace it.
Sorry, how do you see us in a general way in Canada? How are we doing in palliative work? What are you observing?
I think we're among the world leaders. I think if you're going to die, Canada's one of the better places to die.
Really?
Well, we've got a universal health system, so everyone has access to care. It's not based upon income the way it is in the U.S. I think there's been a real effort at a national level to try to encourage conversation about death, to try to educate caregivers about how to deliver this type of care. We've got a long way to go, but we're doing okay. Now, I think if you're in a very rural area, and there's parts of Canada that are very rural, it's very patchy. You know, we've got another decade or two of work to fill in those gaps. But I look around Peterborough County, you can have a great death in Norwood or Apsley. You don't have to be in the city of Peterborough. You can get good care given in your home and have a good death there as well.
How has there been any change in the public in regard to some of the medications that get used? You know, I'm thinking some of the morphine thing about sedation. What's that like when you're talking with families about that? Has that changed over time? Are people more open?
There's a lot less fear of it and fear of addiction, but that's a conversation we have all the time, Red, where we help people understand that using narcotics at the end of life is not a situation that's going to create addiction.
Right.
And that is very helpful for them. Addiction is a combination of exposure to a medication and a predisposed personality. It doesn't happen just because you take the drug. There's got to be other issues going on in your life that come together to produce the addiction. And when people understand that, their anxiety sort of settles. Now, in a family where there have been addiction issues, it can be extremely complicated to manage pain.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because I think that's something I often hear is that I don't want to feel, I don't want to have any pain.
Yeah.
And how do we manage pain?
How do we manage that? We
Right.
can help them manage it, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of conversation around that.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that. It's certainly, that's when I ask people about their fears, it's often the dying process as opposed to death itself. At least that's what they say. So I think that process is really the anxiety producing piece of it.
Yeah. And David, that's a conversation we often have where, we not only talk about, to answer Red's questions earlier, about, well, where are we right now on this road, but where does the road go and what does that look like? Mm-hmm. And helping reassure people that we can deal with the problems that come up. We can help manage them. We can help you meet your goals. It can be very, very much help manage that anxiety. Yeah.
What about the general kind of existential anxiety? Just any thoughts you'd like to just say about just, and by existential, I mean just the anxiety about dying, about death, about my time is limited, what happens after I die, and
I mean, I've learned a lot about this from David.
We all have.
Yeah,
we all have. Yeah.
In that, you just sort of lay it out there. It's real. It's there.
Yeah.
There may not be a solution, but it's okay to feel that, and it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to sit with it, as uncomfortable as it can be. And I, since I've started doing that rather than trying to talk around it or make it better, I found my relationships are more genuine with the patients. They realize, this is a hard thing we're looking at.
Right, because I find it's often in but it's in the labeling of it, allowing it to be there, saying, this is here. This is sitting here as a fear, as a anxiety. That in and of itself can be a relief for people, is that we're just giving it space. We're not trying to push it aside. We're not trying to pretend it's not there.
It's in the room with us.
It's in the room with us, and we're just saying, come on in, take a seat.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I know our time is going, and I have one question I really want to ask.
We've still got time.
And so John and I are pretty well the same age. We did grow up together in the same neighborhood and
played road hockey.
Well, you played road hockey with a lot of people.
Yeah, the North End was a happening hub.
It was a happening place. But John, you and I are in the last third of our life. Let's talk about it that way, anyway. How is this work that you've spent so much of your time passionately in? And I mean, you're known everywhere as this and recently received an award.
That's right.
Which we are so excited about. What's it done for your own personal views around your own coming to the end of life?
ironically, it's made it's helped with that anxiety, that existential anxiety. I know that death is a reality. I know that death is something we will all face. When it happens to me, I'm just part of every human that's ever lived. And so that's the fear of that is I don't feel that. It's also made me make sure I keep my life tidy. If there's stuff I need to do, I do it. And I enjoy the day. I enjoy the moment because I know that can go quickly. So, I think living next to death makes you very aware and makes you, I wouldn't say comfortable, but I think more accepting that, this is going to happen to me too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I hope we can persuade you to come back from time to time for some conversation, because there's a lot of, I think we've talked about some areas that I think we still need to broach, but it would be great to have.
Yeah, there's lots we can unpack, and you guys are so easy to talk with. It'll be fun to come back again.
Oh yeah, I'm a big talker. It's funny you said there. One of the things I think you were alluding to there at the end is living with death so much teaches you how to live. Death is a great teacher.
Well put,
right?
Yeah.
And when you are in that place where you realize it's going to happen to me too, and you accept that.
Yeah.
The two places where we're connected, the only relationships we share is we're born and we're going to die, but that connects us all as human beings. And being in that environment and having those conversations with people and doing the work that you do, death is a great tutor.
Yeah. It is.
It teaches us how to live and how to appreciate what we do every day, and that we are alive.
And it cuts through the clutter that can often come into our lives. You get to the core pretty quickly, which is.
And I think that's one of the things that people, that when you say this is the work that you do, and they go, how do you do that work? You go, because it's as much about living, or more about living, as much, because it is about living.
It is about living.
Because dying is a part of living.
Yeah, it's very much about living. Yeah.
How do you answer that? I know you just answered part of it, but when people go, oh, I don't know how you do that.
Well, you talk to people about the fact that death is a reality, and if you can help someone through that journey and ease their suffering, and in the broadest definition, there's a certain satisfaction in that. There's a satisfaction, and so you do get that. That's not to say there aren't moments of real sadness. There aren't moments of real poignancy where you go, oh, how does this happen? But at the end of the day, there's a sense of satisfaction that maybe you made it a little bit better.
Absolutely.
And just in a final word from me, I really think, John, that you have left a legacy in it, and I've commented so much. We have a great palliative physician team here, and they're all young, which speaks to me of the mentoring that you have done and allowed Peterborough and area and county to be in a good space for the future too. And that's, I think, for all of us, the recognizing of as we come to the end, that there are others that need to be there too. And so I think we have some wonderful palliative physicians.
Well, David, you've just gone through this, and I feel the same way, that your last sort of professional task is to replace yourself, and you've done that.
Yep.
And I've been fortunate to work with incredible young physicians who have great energy, ideas, and drive. And it makes it easier to let go. It makes it easier to retire, knowing that there's this vibrancy coming behind you.
We're in good hands.
We're in good hands.
Well, I think as David said, there's lots more we could talk about, and so we'd love to have you back at another time.
We'll do it again.
We'll do it again. But any final words from you, John, or, we were talking before we started recording today about how we know that there's a lot of people in our area that really follow hospice puts out. And so knowing that many of these people that are been friends of Hospice Peterborough for a long time, anything else you want to say or like to leave people with?
Well, I've always felt that a hospice is only going to survive if the community believes in it and wants to be part of it. And we're very fortunate in Peterborough that we have this group of people who really treasure what hospice does and support it. And without that, we wouldn't be able to do this work. It's not an individual exercise. It really is a community response. And hospice is just the face of this community passion to deliver good care at the end of life.
I think that's a lovely note of just recognition and gratitude for our community out there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.